Hi there, this is Ideas on Truth, and I'm Lisa Taylor. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining me. You know, I'm talking about relationships tonight, and I wanted to share a little story with you. This is back in the day. This is I've been married almost 30 years, and this is when I was dating prior to marriage. And I really, in the worst way, wanted to be in a relationship. Hey, Mary Beth, nice to see you. And I remember writing out a list of qualities that I wanted to have in a mate, in a partner. And I wrote this long list, like a legal size pad, 2 columns on each page, just list of qualities, pages and pages. And the next day, and I kid you not, the next day, met this guy. Actually, this guy sort of approached me, and I guess he'd been watching me for a while I was dating somebody else. Approached me, and it seemed he had every quality I'd listed. Like, seriously. We started dating, and long story short, it ended up being a disaster of a relationship. Very codependent, very destructive, soul-sucking, horrible relationship. And I left off that list several very key qualities, as it turns out. So, 2 things I learned from that. One, my goal was to list all the qualities and to express the qualities that I wanted to attract, which I did. So I was expressing all of those qualities and attracted those qualities. So that was kind of the first thing. If you feel that you want a partner of a certain type, start expressing the qualities that you want to have included in your life. Because you're not meeting somebody, and we all know this, the line from Jerry Maguire, "You complete me," not a good line. No. The other person does not complete you. You want to be a complete person. Hey, Colleen. Hey, Elo. You want to be a complete person before you partner up with somebody. You want to be 2 wholes coming together. Obviously, we know that. So it's not that you're making a list of things that you want somebody else to bring to the table. It's making a list of things that you want to express that therefore you will attract. Okay, so we get that part. And make sure you make a complete list, because I made that mistake. So the other thing I learned from this process was that, and I didn't think I was going to talk about this, but I look back on that experience and I realized that very little by little, I let go of myself in the process of sort of partnering with this person. I let go of my own standard to align with his standard. So he was very controlling, and I kind of let him have his way, his decisions, his sense of control, little by little by little. And little by little, it was chipping away at my own sense of self. I was letting that go. So one of the big ahas from that experience was, don't ever let go of who you are. Always stand firm, knowing who you are, knowing your own identity, being very clear with your own alignment of your highest self, and identifying that clearly every day, as we talk about having a practice every day where you identify your true self and you align yourself with source so that you're expressing from your highest sense of self. So fast forward a little bit, actually had a really wonderful healing. That relationship ended very, very badly. There was a lot of codependence, a lot of sort of destructive tendencies. There was abuse involved, and I actually was working with a spiritual practitioner to get out of the attachment of this relationship, and found myself on the floor of the practitioner's office. I'd flown across the country to work with this practitioner in person, and was on the floor of their office, and it got to be 5 o'clock. I borrowed a car to get there. It got to be 5 o'clock, and he said, "Okay, 5 o'clock, gotta go. Just turn off the lights and lock the door behind you." And I was like incensed. Like, what? In my hour of need, you're going to leave me? Best thing he could have done. Because what was true in that moment is, because I borrowed the car and I'd given my word to somebody that I'd get the car back in time to go to this service that night, I got myself up off the floor, and that sense of responsibility of thinking about someone else broke through the mesmeric state I was in of woe is me and my life is all this suffering, And it was like waking up from a dream. So I'm sure the practitioner was doing his work. clearly. And that's what caused this breakthrough of this healing. So it was like waking up from a dream. It was one moment I was in this state of fuzzy sense of self, kind of wrapped up in the codependence. And the next minute I was clear. And you know when you wake up from a dream and there's like this fast fade of the details? Like you're just kind of grasping, like I don't quite remember, like the details they just kind of go into mist. That's exactly what happened with the details of this relationship, this codependent, destructive relationship. When I woke up from the mesmerism, it was like the details of it just did this fast fade. And I was myself again. I found myself standing in my true self. And went to a church service that night, which was a gratitude service. And actually wasn't planning on sharing this story, but since I'm here, I'm going to share this story. And was sitting between my two girlfriends, because the one who was in sort of need of support always sat between the other two. So I was sitting between my two girlfriends, and this guy walks in late. And I look over and think, wow, he's really cute. And then I'm like talking to myself going, Lisa, really? Are you kidding me? You just got up off the floor of the practitioner's office and you're now thinking about another guy? Are you kidding? No more men. None. Sign off, swear off on men. So I talked myself out of that. And this thought of meeting this guy just kept coming to me, like this angel thought. And I was arguing fiercely with that angel, like, no way am I going to meet this guy? And it was like, no, you need to meet this guy. No way. So I argued all the way through the service. Nope, not going to meet the guy. So I get up from the service and my friend says to me, hey, you should meet Jay, this guy. And it's like, okay. So I decide, okay, I will be obedient to this angel message and I will go try to meet him. And I try to tap him on his shoulder. And just at that moment, an intern that I had hired back in Boston saw me and kind of grabbed me and whipped me around, and I just missed his shoulder. And I thought, okay, God, I tried. So I didn't meet him at that point. Talked to the intern. He goes out this other door. I think he's gone. 10 minutes later, I'm standing out in the parking lot and he comes walking out and I'm thinking, really? So I said, okay, Joy, what's his name again? She said, Jay. So by now he's across the parking lot and I yell across the parking lot. Yes, that is the kind of girl I am. If I'm being obedient to an angel, I will yell across a parking lot. Yell across the parking lot, Jay! And I go walking up to him, and he's looking at me like, do I know this person? And I go up and I introduce myself and say, hi, I'm Lisa. I just got a really strong sense I'm supposed to meet you. What do you do? And just sort of start chatting. And he starts talking about working on this documentary on teachers, and I immediately think, oh, because I was just at the transition between working in radio and working in television, and I thought, oh, I'm supposed to meet him for work. Oh, phew, it's not a personal thing, it's a work thing. So I go into work mode, like, do you want to have coffee, and do you want to get together? And so we end up arranging to go to coffee the next day. Long story short, we have coffee, it turns into dinner, it turns into a very long walk around a very short block, and there is kissing involved. But there is a scene, I should tell you the scene before that though. This is the night of, this is back in, when was this? 88. So it's the Lakers-Celtics playoff, another Lakers-Celtics playoff. I'm living in Boston, he's living in LA. So of course we're rivals. But we're at my friend's house watching this playoff game. And I get up and I go to the restroom and I come back and his back is to me, he's sitting down. And I think, okay, I'll put my hand on his shoulder. And if he responds, he's interested. If he doesn't, he's not. So I put my hand on his shoulder and he immediately puts his hand up on my hand and I think, oh. So from the moment I met him, I felt like there was a larger purpose involved. I thought it was work, but as we talked during dinner, it seemed to be more and more sort of like there was a personal connection there. And then when he put his hand up and I thought, oh, and then we went for the walk around the block. It was one block. I think it took us 3 hours to get around the block because we kept sitting on a wall, making out, blah, blah, blah. I'm giving you way too much information. Anyway, so I knew that night that I would marry the man. I knew this was my husband. I knew that it just felt like home. It felt like I could be completely myself. I had no sense of pressure. I had no sense of I need to perform or I need to be a certain way for him to like me. I was able to be completely in my comfort space and it felt like home. I don't know how else to describe it. We ended up having to go our separate ways the next day. We both had to go off to these spiritual retreats. We ended up going to 2 different ones, but we both went to one each year. And then I went back to Boston, and he stayed in LA, and we wrote snail mail letters, because this was before, a lot of electronic emailing and texting and all of that stuff. And we wrote letters back and forth and got to know each other through letters for many months, and then got together, and a year later ended up getting married. So the reason I was telling you that whole story, why was that? Why did I go into this whole story? Relationships. So there was a juncture at which, when he came out to visit me, there was a juncture at which it seemed like it was a big mistake that we had gotten together. He'd flown east. We were going to travel together for a little bit, and we spent one night in this little B&B, and the next morning it just seemed like this was a huge mistake. He was going to fly back, and I was kind of in that, prove yourself man, and because I was kind of tough, and something very interesting happened, and this was a real turning point for me. We ended up deciding to go for a walk before we would decide if he would leave, and we would sort of say, scratch this isn't working. During that walk, and this was really a God thing, I was very quiet, which for me is a little unusual. And instead of me kind of challenging him and sort of getting him to prove himself and show me his strength, there was something about just listening and letting go of control of the relationship and the communication. There was a moment at which, instead of doing this kind of position mentally and even physically, I did this. And what came out of my mouth was, "What are you afraid of?" So I wasn't in that prove yourself to me mode. I was in, let me be of service to you. Let me help you overcome whatever this fear is. And I honestly believe that good relationships are based in that kind of love. There's a quote in Science and Health, Mrs. Eddy says, happiness is spiritual, born of truth and love. And truth and love are both capitalized. So it's that spiritual sense of truth and that spiritual sense of love. It's not a personal sense, which is limited and egoic and runs very hot and cold and tends to be that kind of roller coaster love. But truth and love in a spiritual sense is divine. And that's the kind of truth and love that we find in God, in Source, in our connection to our divine sense of self. And when we connect to that in ourself and we express that outwardly, like I did in that moment, I was loving him from a divine standpoint. I was not loving him from a human standpoint, because if I had been, I would have been in my ego and I would have said, you know what, why are you being so weak? Why don't you show me your strength, and why don't you prove yourself to me? And it would have gone down a very different road. So it was a major turning point in our relationship. I honestly think if that had not occurred, I don't think we would have stayed together. I think he would have flown back to LA, and we would have gone our separate ways, and that would have been the end of that. And we've been married almost 30 years. It'll be 30 years in October. So obviously it was a good moment, and it was a good transition. Happiness is spiritual, born of truth and love. It is unselfish. I'm continuing with the quote. Therefore, it cannot exist alone, but requires all mankind to share it. And I honestly believe that when we understand our sense of self, when we are connected to our highest sense of self, we are connected to Source, we are connected to our divine identity, and we are expressing that, and we are expressing a divine sense of love, we're expressing that from Source, it is unselfish. It is other-focused. It is not a personally based, sourced thing. It doesn't run out. It's not variable. It doesn't flip-flop with the wind or the circumstances. It's a constant, and it doesn't change based on what the other person is giving us. Colleen actually posted a thing the other day on her website about that sense of divine love not being dependent on what's outside of you, that it's not dependent on the object. It really is a reflection of who you are. We are love. We are the manifestation of love. So when we are manifesting and expressing our highest sense of self, we are expressing love. Love is a synonym for God. God is our source. God is the source of all being. So when we're expressing, when we're reflecting our source, we are reflections of love. We are love expressed. And when we express love in that sense, we're never lonely. We're all one, so we can never be alone. We're all one. So one with God is a majority. If we are in love, we are in the expression of love. We are in the manifestation of love. We are never without love. And there have been a lot of posts recently about people struggling with loneliness. And my heart, I struggle with it too. Even being married, even being in close relationships, we struggle with loneliness. I think we all struggle with it at times. And I only always go back to, what can I give in this moment? When I feel lonely, when I feel alone, I really challenge myself to say, am I expecting somebody else to fill a piece of me, fill up some part of me that's feeling bereft? If I'm expecting that to come from the outside, I'm doing it backwards. I need to be looking to God. I need to be looking within and looking to my highest sense of self. And I need to be challenging myself to pour that outward, not to try to get somebody else to pour it into me. I need to be pouring it outward, because when I pour it outward and express it outwardly, I am connecting to it, and I'm giving of my rich overflow, which means I'm not lonely anymore, and I'm connecting to somebody else who needs it. And happiness, what does she say? It is unselfish, therefore it cannot exist alone, but requires all mankind to share it. There's another place she talks about human affection is not poured forth vainly, even if it meet no return. You can never lose by loving more. You can never lose anything. You don't diminish love. You don't diminish your sense of love by giving it away. It's not like there's this finite amount of love, and if you give some to somebody else, you're missing it from yourself. If you give, there's more of love. If you express love, there's more of it expressed. It just expands exponentially as we express it, as we realize that we are a part of love, that we are the expression of love, and we express it. We're just increasing the expression of love on the planet. And that's what we all need. So I don't know if there's really a point to this whole thing that I'm talking about, and I'm not really sure, but just take heart. Take heart that if you're feeling lonely, you're not alone, that you are all one with all of us. We are all one. So we're never alone. And you are one with God, meaning one with God as a majority. It means God is your best, your ever friend. You're always one with Source. You're always one with love, and can be feeling filled up with that. If you're feeling bereft of it, start expressing it. Force yourself to just give love, and you will feel more love. And if you're wanting to connect with other people, start expressing the qualities that you want in your life. Don't expect it to come from another person. Don't expect it to come from another personality, from a source outside of yourself, because that ends badly. Trust me, it ends badly. Look within, look to your source, express it outwardly, and you will attract what you express. And if you are aligned with your source and they are aligned with their source, and you're both two complete expressions of the allness of God, and you come together this way instead of this way, it's kind of that triangle. Like, here's God, and here's each, I don't know, I'm doing this with a pen in my hand. Here's one person, here's the other person, and here's God. instead of connecting just person to person, both of you go to God and connect in God. And then it's a divine union. It's a divine connection. And it can only be a fulfilling and growing sense of love. The other piece that I wanted to talk about, actually, and I know it sounded like I was wrapping up, but I'm not, still going. The other piece I wanted to mention was, yes, divine relationships will push your buttons. Oh my gosh. Yes, the places that you need to grow and learn and express more of Source in, those are the places that are going to piss you off about the other person. It just happens that way. Then you know it's a divine relationship because it is there for your learning. It is there for your growth. It is there for you to express more clearly that divine sense of love. So don't give up on it. When it gets tough, check in. Am I expecting them to fulfill me? If you are, change your own thought. Don't expect them to change, because what they're thinking is none of your business. What they're doing is none of your business. Check your own thinking. Check how you're viewing them. Make sure that's accurate. And check how you're viewing yourself. So that's number one. And number two, what was I talking about? I just totally lost my train of thought. Oh, pushing each other's buttons. And number two, make sure that if your buttons are being pushed, you're not looking at them as the reason for their being pushed. You're looking at what is it in you that you need to uplift, that you need to expand your understanding of. What is it in you that you need to get a clearer, more divine sense of that will dissolve that trigger? And there have been many instances, I know I've shared lots of stories with you here about different struggles I've had with family members, and only every time, if I go back and correct my own thinking and make sure that I'm identifying myself correctly and I'm identifying the other people correctly, then things get resolved naturally. And what do I mean by identifying the other person correctly? I mean, see them the way God sees them. How does God see your child, your spouse, your best friend, the person at work, the neighbor, whoever it is you're having an issue with? How are you identifying them? Are you identifying them the way God sees them? And if you're not, strive to do that. Strive to see them through the eyes of divine love, not through the eyes of personal sense. Because that's the thing. The personal sense is, the coin that has two sides, the good side and the bad side. Divine sense, spiritual sense, is all good. God is good, and God is all. Therefore, all is good. The illusion of a dualistic experience is the egoic thinking that is separating from Source. If the ego wants to say, oh, I'm on my own over here, I'm separate from Source, I'm my own thing, then it can see a good and a bad. It's all an illusion. That doesn't really exist. That's just the ego playing in its own little sandbox. It's not a real sandbox. It's an illusion. Kind of like that relationship I had. It was all an illusion. And when I woke up from the illusion. I woke up from the dream, and it was over. It was completely gone. It was such a clear example of how we can get whipped into believing the illusion as reality when it's not. So anyway, all right. So I love you guys, and thank you so much for watching. Colleen is still here. Put your God hat on and take a better look at the person or situation that is frustrating you. Yes, put your God hat on. Put on your God glasses and your God ears and your God hat. Is that a pointy hat or a flat hat? I don't know. Maybe a round hat. All right. I love you guys. Thank you for watching. I feel like I want to have a conversation with all of you. I want to do like a big Zoom call and have everybody join in. That would be really fun. Joy Tessman. Oh my gosh. Joy Tessman, you're coming in at the end of this. And I love you too, Colleen. And I love you too, Joy. And Elo, and there were several other people watching. So thank you guys for watching, and talk to you soon. Write me an email, post this, hey Miss Joy. Share this out, write comments below, subscribe to my YouTube channel. I know you guys have all done that, but share this with friends who might like this. This has been kind of a longer Ideas on Truth, and I'm thinking that I may be doing this about once a week, do kind of a longer one on a particular subject, and get going a little bit. All right, love you guys. Talk to you soon. Let me know what you think. Bye.